Would you ask Mr. Groves to come back in, please? Right, Mr. Groves?
Yes, thank you.
Ready to carry on?
Yes.
Good. Yes, Mr. Kerr.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Groves, you'll remember before the break we were dealing with Tcap 0124 and incident command training. And at the start of this afternoon session, I'd like to take you to some email correspondence in which you were involved. And so for that purpose, can we go to LFB 000-42263, which is an email from Stephen Green to you on the 14th of December 2013. Which is entitled Tcap 0124 Lacknell House. We'll see as we go through the chain that it discusses the findings of the training pilot. Can we look first of all at page 2, which is your email to Stephen Green and Andy Worsom, sent on the 13th of December 2013, 1808. First of all, can you help us, or people watching, who was Andy Worsom and what position did he hold?
Andy Worsom was a group manager within the Learning and Development Strategy team.
And Stephen Green was a member of the same team.
He was indeed.
Now, you say in that email, and I quote, "Please see Alistair's email below. This summation position statement does not accord with anecdotal evidence that I have been receiving. Can you please annotate your comments within the body of Alistair's email below?" And just for the sake of context, can we just scroll down? And just so you can see Alistair Cummings' email, which starts on page 2, but substance is at page 3. And I'll just let you have a quick skim read of that to remind yourself of the context. When you reach the phrase, some of the comments from delegates included, will you please shout? Because I don't think you need to read any further for context.
Okay, yep.
Now, if we can go back to your email on page 2, where you said that summation position statement does not accord with anecdotal evidence that you had heard about the pilot. Can you remember what anecdotal evidence you had heard, and if so, from whom?
I can't recall that, sorry.
Nothing.
No.
Now, can we go to page 1 of this chain, which is Stephen Green's response? And it's sent at 14th of December 2013 at 12:12. And if that could be expanded, we see that he prefaces a number of comments he makes in the body of this email chain, but halfway down, he says this, and I quote, "In summary, I feel he," so that would be Alistair presumably, "is trying to pull a fast one and knows full well the requirement has not been met. Doug's work is good, but they are struggling to convert that into training. They have an inexperienced senior IM," so what does IM stand for?
Incident management.
Incident management training team trying to deliver this. They're not committing, have not planned sufficiently to support delivery of this work. Conscious that we are up against it here, if you need to talk to me, need me to do anything, phones are on over the weekend, so feel free to call. Now, if we can look at some of the comments that Mr. Green makes in relation to this email, can we turn to page 4 of this chain and halfway down page 4? Now, as we've seen, Alistair Cumming of Babcock had set out feedback on the Tcap 0124 pilot, including the quotation, "For me, an improvement on the ICE from previous courses. Other courses you could sit there and have no input, a lot better." Now, to that quotation, Mr. Green has added this. "This would not be difficult, as the previous was very poor. Again, this about satisfying the Rule 43 elements of the Tcap. Candidates would be unaware of what these are, so not in a position to comment." My question, the direct one, do you agree that the existing incident command exercises were, quotes, "very poor," close quotes?
No. No, I have no experience of feedback to say that the incident command exercise were very poor.
Had you formed a separate view as to the quality of those exercises rather?
I hadn't received any feedback, and I hadn't taken part in one of those myself, so I couldn't comment.
Now, staying in this email, Mr. Cumming then says, following the pilot, which is at the bottom of the screen at the moment, following the pilot, a meeting was held to discuss the package. The key points of that were: 1, the CDE package provided was accepted as meeting the requirements of the coroner's instruction to provide an enhancement to incident command training. Source: Andy Bell, Neil Withers, Damien Candish. Mr. Green then adds the following comment. Although you cannot see it, I apologise, differentiated in the text. He said this: "Not sure what meeting he is referring to. Meeting on 10th of December, Withers was not present, all except that the proposals, paperwork, satisfy the Rule 43 and Tcap. Currently, they have not managed to translate these into training." Now, throughout that email, Mr. Green makes a number of references to translating the proposals into training and making them work. Can you give the panel an idea of the difficulties that Babcock were encountering in translating proposals into effective training?
I don't really have great recollection of this. I think this would centre around the fact around their sector competence. So I'd imagine it relates back to the draw on LFB time to provide a more sort of subject matter input. So I'd imagine that's what that's referring to.
Now, if we can stay within this chain, but go to page 6 and halfway down that page. Excuse me. Now, Mr. Cumming starts the section headed "In Conclusion," which reads, and I quote, "I am satisfied that the requirements of the coroner have been met and can be reported as such." Mr. Green then interjects with his comment, and he says this: "If he really believes this, it does not bode well for future dealings, and we need a frank exchange about expectation. Personally, I don't think he does, and feel he is attempting to do a very crude job on us. At a time when we are trying to foster trust, this is not helpful." Now, we do not have a reply from you in relation to Mr. Green's comments. The first question is this: what steps did you take to answer the problems that had been identified by Mr. Green in answer to Mr. Cummings's email?
Yeah, I can't, as I say, I can't specifically remember this, but what I can say is what I would do in generally if this was the case. So I would meet with Mr. Cummings. I would go through the evidence that he had said and what I had heard from my officers. It would have been raised with my line manager and at a governance meeting, which probably would have been the Performance and Commissioning Board.
Would you have raised it with Mr. Reason, the ultimate director with the responsibility?
I would have raised it with my line manager, which was probably Mr. Dalglish, who in turn I would imagine would raise that with Mr. Reason.
Can you say whether those steps were in fact taken, or would that have been the normal course of events in light of comments such as these?
That's the normal course of events. I couldn't say categorically that took place on this occasion.
Can we go back to the Tcap form and page 14 of that form, which is LFB quadruple 03716? If we go to page 14. Now we can see there that your signature in the final sign-off box, second from the top, sorry,
Yep.
dated the 8th of August 2016. Is that when you signed off the Tcap?
Yes.
Now, when you signed off the Tcap in August 2016, were you content that the problems reported to you in late 2013 had been satisfactorily addressed?
I wouldn't have signed it off if I didn't believe that was the case.
Can you remember whether the substance of those problems that were communicated in December 2013 remained a constant source of discussion in the following 2 3/4 years?
I know that, as I mentioned earlier, there were issues around the subject matter expertise of Babcock. I also know that there was relationship difficulties between officers from my team and the design team at Babcock.
But you were satisfied everything had been resolved to enable you to sign this off on the 8th of August 2016?
Yeah, I wouldn't have signed it off if I didn't feel that the training was fit for purpose.
Can we now turn to your second witness statement to the inquiry, which is at LFB 00102138/69 and paragraph 148. Now, you see that in that paragraph, you say this in the first line, and I quote, "A new suite of incident command courses were developed through the Tcap process. Tcap 0124, Enhanced Incident Command Training, based on Lacknell Inquest Rule 43 recommendations, is produced Exhibit PG 10. Following the coroner's recommendation, a review was undertaken by the Brigade and Babcock to establish whether the existing IC training addressed the specific elements highlighted by the coroner. The new suite of courses included the Blackwall and Holcroft House exercises. Both exercises were designed to incorporate the focus areas highlighted by the coroner, including situational awareness of changing circumstances, anticipation of fire behaviour inconsistent with the compartmentation principle, and awareness of risk to those above and adjacent to the fire flat, although only the Holcroft House exercise was ever used in training." Now, bearing in mind what you say there, can we look at LFB quadruple 04801, which is a report entitled the Lacknell House Incident Assurance Review? Now, as you can see from the front page, this report was written by the LFB in August 2018 for the Brigade's Grenfell Tower Investigation and Review Team. Are you familiar with the contents of this report?
Yes.
Certainly insofar as it affects training.
Yes.
Now, the report in broad terms summarises the work undertaken by the Brigade following the Lacknell House fire in 2009. And if we could turn to page 29 in this document and Action 3B, B for Bravo. Now, Action 3B, as its title states there, concerns review incident command training to ensure the 7 points, i.e. the recommendations made by the coroner, are adequately covered. And in the right-hand column on this page, in the second paragraph from the top, we see the following text. We need to de-amplify the page to see that. And the relevant column says this: "The training commissioning documentation describes the development of a further residential high-rise command decision exercise called Holcroft House. No evidence was provided to confirm that this command decision exercise has been completed and is in use." Now, bearing in mind what that assurance review says, Mr. Groves, when you said in your second witness statement that only the Holcroft House exercise was ever used, would you accept that that was inaccurate?
This document?
Your statement?
No, because the Holcroft House scenario was used.
And so your evidence is that the assurance review is inaccurate?
Holcroft House scenario was used throughout 2016.
Can you help us as to when it was put into practice, the Holcroft House exercise?
I believe it was 2016. It may have been the end of 2015, but it was definitely used.
Would you have satisfied yourself that the Holcroft House exercise had been rolled out before you signed off the Tcap in August 2016?
If it was listed as a scenario, yes, but I can't say that for definite that it was listed or not.
Can we go to BAB, a document provided by Gordon Reynolds, the Director of Fire at Babcock Training, and it's BAB 00005. Now, this set out relevant training packages, including their Tcap numbers and the dates when the materials were first available. If we can go to page 13 of this schedule, and the first row of the table, we see an entry for the Tcap we're considering at the moment, so Tcap 0124. And you'll see in the column headed Date of First Incident Command Course, where reference materials were available. So the second from the right, he says this: these materials were piloted on numerous occasions between 2014 and 2016, with a final pilot demonstration to LFB being delivered in May 2016. The Level 1 IC courses that these materials were intended for were superseded by the following courses. He sets them out. New exercises for these 3 courses were created in line with the prioritised incident types supplied by the LFB. Now, the course codes that are provided there in that column refer to incident command courses which came about as a result of Babcock's 3-year initial course review process. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it therefore appear that during the 3 years of this Tcap's progression, the course review process had resulted in new incident command courses. Is that a fair reading of that document?
That is, yes.
And had that fact negated the need for the Holcroft House review to be carried out?
Holcroft House exercise was definitely used. So
And you're absolutely certain about that?
I know that's to be the case, yes.
Now, one of the things that is striking about the date range which is set out in that column is the amount of time it took to develop the incident command control exercises that were referred to, and it looks like a period of 3 years. First of all, would 3 years be, insofar as there's a benchmark, normal for development of courses concerned with this subject matter?
A normal Tcap would potentially take up to a year to complete. Incident command, due to its complexity and the issues that were discussed earlier around subject matter expertise, did elongate the Tcap process.
Was 3 years an undue elongation of the process?
Yes.
This may be an unfair question, and please don't hesitate to say so if you think it is. But bearing in mind the subject matter and its particular requirements, how long would you have expected the process reasonably to have taken?
A year.
And the reason for the delay was the reasons we discussed earlier this morning?
Yes.
Lack of expertise on the side of Babcock and the problems that flowed. You were head of training.
Yep.
What did you do to ensure the prioritisation and the expedition of this important stream of work?
So at this time, I had moved from training insurance and business relationship and had taken over the commissioning function. So I reviewed all of the Tcaps that were on the books at that time, and I called a meeting with Alistair Cumming and Gordon Reynolds and asked for a position statement in terms of where we are, what was the expectation, when were things going to be delivered. And then I presented to my line manager at the time the issues that were causing concern, and that was Mr. Dale Gleish at the time, and he discussed the matters with Gordon Reynolds. I believe there was also a meeting that took place with the Commissioner and Babcock's Chief Executive at the time.
So it's escalated to the very high level.
Yeah.
Before we leave Holcroft House and just trying to find out what happened to it,
Yes.
do you know enough to say that Holcroft House was rolled into the programmes that are set out in this column or not? Would it have been subsumed there, do you think? If you don't feel able to say, then please.
I would imagine so, but I couldn't say.
I'll leave it there. Thank you. Now, we have routinely discussed Babcock's initial course review, and in particular in respect of incident command. Can we go to a document, LFB 000-43552, which is Babcock's report on that review process, and in particular on incident management training? Now we see the date at the bottom of that front page is July 2013, but if we can go to the covering email under which it was sent, which is LFB 000-73973, that email was sent on the 27th of October 2014, and so presumably were there various drafts passing between the LFB and Babcock between July 2013 and 2014 when the report was finally finished?
Yes.
Now, if we can go back to the report itself at LFB 000-43552, you can take it from me that it contains only 2 references to LACNOR.
Okay.
The first is at page 12, and if we can go to that, and paragraph 6.1. And you'll see there, the left-hand column is entitled Historical Context, and if we look at the 5th paragraph down, it starts with the words, since 1991. And if that could be expanded, please. It says there, since 1991, there have been other notable events which have further influenced incident management training, including, and we see that Lacknell House is 4th in that list, along with Bethnal Green and other incidents. Now, the second reference to Lacknell is in the appendix, which starts at page 30. And if we go to page 30, there we go. And if we can now go to the bottom of page 32, and we see a row headed Political Considerations. And if we, it's a general statements of principle there, but if we turn over the page to page 33, and we see in that top box, under the heading Current Issues for Consideration, the first of which is the outcome of the Lacknell House inquest and Rule 43 letter to the LFB. Now, given there are only 2 references to Lacknell in this document, there is nothing to indicate that the coroner's 7 incident command recommendations have been substantially incorporated into or considered by this comprehensive or supposedly comprehensive review. Are you able to explain why those matters aren't covered?
I can't explain why they're not specifically covered within this within the review. What I can say is that my department, others, had to provide regular updates to ODCB explaining the progress against those 7 requirements. So I don't know why Babcock didn't specifically list those in that document.
Now, can we turn to email correspondence that you're involved in whilst various drafts were being sort of circulated? And if we can go to LFB 000-71968. And this is in the bottom of the page, you can see email correspondence, October 2013. And it's an email from Gary Reason, so the director with ultimate responsibility for these matters, sent to yourself and Mr. Dalglish, your immediate superior. And in that email, he said this in the first paragraph. Please find attached my OBS and revisions relating to the Incident Command Course Review document. In summary, I don't have any major issues with the direction of travel being proposed by Babcock, but I'm still struggling to see how we move forward in terms of designing and delivering some of the new courses. Now, I suppose the question is this: why did you not take the opportunity in October 2013, when prompted to by Mr. Reason, to highlight that the Rule 43 recommendations regarding incident command training needed to be incorporated into Babcock's review?
Because the review, I would imagine at that time I didn't feel that that they were being ignored. Whilst the document doesn't specifically state that, I have no recollection that I felt that they weren't being addressed.
Now, if we can go back to the Tcap form itself and go to LFB quadruple 03716 on page 10. We can see the second paragraph starts with the words confirmation of. And if that could be expanded, thank you. Confirmation of the Tcap being closed following the successful completion of Holocraft House, CDE for Level 1 Instant Command, was agreed in 2016. The rest of the existing elements of this Tcap have been incorporated into the ongoing Instant Command course review. Now, having regard to that extract, we have not been provided with any evidence to indicate that this Tcap or the Lacknell House Coroner's 7 recommendations were incorporated into the Instant Command course review. Mm-hmm. Now, when you signed this Tcap as completed, can we take it that you're aware, first of all, of those recommendations?
Yes, I would have been aware of the recommendations.
You're aware of the work of the Tcap?
I was aware of the Tcap.
Why then didn't you take steps to ensure that the 7 recommendations were expressly covered in the review documents?
Because, as I've said previously, even though it might not have been explicit within the review document, we would have had discussions with the commissioning department, who are the subject matter experts, and they would have advised us whether those 7 elements have been included in the training.
Now, bearing in mind that at phase 1 of this inquiry, the chairman heard evidence from Watch Manager Dowden, the first instant commander at the tower. Yep. And we've been provided with a copy of Mr. Dowden's training records, and we can go to them, which are LFB quadruple 03571. And if the document manager could focus in on page 24, row 1589. So it's page 24, 1589. Just whilst we're waiting, I'll flag up the point I want to put to you, Mr. Groves, is that in that particular row, there is an entry with the title OFCSTM, which is Operational Command Skills Training Maintenance. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
And Mr. Dowden carried out that course on the 12th of January 2017. Now, is that a reference to the Level 1 Instant Commander Maintenance course?
It is.
Thank you. Now, I'll see whether we can amplify the document. May well be we can't get a better view of it. But during his evidence to the inquiry, Watch Manager Dowden said that he didn't recall receiving training on how to practically handle or look out for early unexpected failure of internal compartmentation or on the impact of building materials and the contents of fire spread. Now, taken at their value, that at the very least suggests that new incident command courses were not effectively training instant commanders or proposed instant commanders. Would you accept that?
No. I mean, if there was a newly commissioned piece of training that had been signed off by the commissioning department as being fit for purpose, then I would say that yes, there was effective training. And it's not just centrally led training. There's other, like Ops News packages that included information around compartmentation. So,
but it was your department had responsibility for ensuring implementation of the recommendations, and one of those recommendations at Lacknell was to anticipate that a fire might behave in a manner inconsistent with the compartmentation principle. Now, bearing in mind what Manager Dowden said, would you accept that at the very least that he was unaware training had not prepared him for the early unexpected failure of internal compartmentation or the impact of building materials or contents on fire spread?
Without seeing the training material for that course, I couldn't categorically say yes or no. And also, I'm not an operational officer, so I couldn't say whether that was the case or not.
Can we go back to your second witness statement then, which is at LFB 00102138/31 and paragraph 55? And we see at paragraph 55 there, in the opening line, Tcap 0124 resulted in changes to course content and incorporated the 7 actions identified in Inquest Action 3B. The following courses were updated with necessary content. Does your evidence remain that the recommendations were implemented by the measures set out in paragraph 55?
Yes.
And just to amplify on that general answer, the new Incident Command courses were a result of Babcock's initial course review programme, is that correct?
Yes.
And the new courses were created through their own Tcaps?
Yes, they were, yes.
But the thrust of your evidence is that you're unsure in which way Holcroft House was incorporated as part of the exercises we've discussed.
That's true, yes.
Thank you. Now, can I turn on to the separate and distinct topic, which is the release of new Incident Command courses in 2016 and 2017? Now, if we go back to Babcock's Incident Command course review, which is at LFB 00043552/26, here we have a page headed Recommendations, and if we could amplify the first paragraph, thank you. It says, "It is a conclusion of the review that whilst there is some scope to improve incident management training in the short term, there is a greater need to adopt a more systematic and fundamental approach involving both the LFB and Babcock to maximise the benefits longer term." And if we could skip to the paragraph, can we skip a paragraph to the heading at 14.1 key recommendation? The text goes on to say this: "It is recommended that a joint LFB Babcock group be established to undertake a systematic and fundamental overhaul of incident management training." And then the report goes on to discuss sort of the relevant detail. First of all, was that proposed joint working group set up?
Yes, that would have been one of the project boards that I referred to earlier.
Was it given a distinct name?
No.
So it was subsumed within the project board process?
It'd be the Incident Command project board.
And just in light of that answer, could we go to a draft agenda for an entity which describes itself as Programme Board Incident Management Review, and that's at LFB 00104739. And we see this is a meeting held on to be held on the 18th of August 2014. Was this the body that had responsibility?
Yes.
And is the programme board different to the project board that is it a question of different names describing the same thing?
Yeah, programme board became the project board.
Thank you. If we go over to page 2 and the first bullet point, we see the terms of reference set out there, which is to provide strategic oversight and guidance to the steering group, hold the steering group accountable for the progress of the incident management review project plan. Can you help us here? There's another group mentioned here, the steering group. What was that?
I don't know.
Can you help us as to how it related to the programme board or reported to the programme board?
No, sorry.
Can you give us any information as to who its members were or were likely to be members of that board?
Steering group membership is listed. So you've got Steve Gellard, Cara Kelly, Doug Massey and Neil Withers.
Does any of that, sorry, looking at that, does any ring a bell as to...
No, it doesn't. No.
So were they to do, put crudely, were they to do the work and report up to the programme board?
It's certainly, they certainly are the doers. Yeah.
And certainly Cara Kelly on the side of Babcock.
Yeah,
Would be on
Cara
that
was
side.
the head of design, and Doug Massey was one of their leads on incident management.
Now, can we go to a separate document, which is a set of minutes from the Incident Command Project Board? And if we go to the July 2015 edition, which can be found at LFB 00110671, there we go. We can see that you head the list of apologies. You don't appear to have attended the next 4 meetings at all.
Yep.
Is it fair to say that this was a matter you delegated down?
Yes, Sabrina was far more in a position she understood. She was an operational officer and knows far more about incident command than I do, and has been providing papers on a national basis, so it made more sense for Sabrina to lead on that.
Would delegated up being more correct? Description those seconds. What was the purpose of the project board?
The purpose of the project board was to deliver whatever the training requirements were. So,
Did it meet regularly? Was there an appointed regularity, or was it on an as and when required basis?
project boards tended to be on a monthly basis.
And the course review covered all levels of incident command, levels 1 through to 4, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, if we go back to your second witness statement at LFB 00102138/35 in paragraph 65, you helpfully set out there a table setting out the level 1 incident command courses which were introduced following the course review, and we see those courses identified. Now, looking at the final column of your table, which is headed on the right-hand side, which is headed date Tcap signed off, we can see that all of those courses were signed off after the Grenfell fire. Is that right?
Yes.
However, in paragraph 66 of the statement below, you say that the courses were first delivered by Babcock to Brigade staff on the dates you set out then. Now, the dates set out in paragraph 66, are those dates of the pilots, or are they dates of the fully approved, signed off course being provided?
It doesn't say pilot, so I would say that those were the first iterations of the course. Just, it may well be that whilst if you look at the first one, STD, which shows the training having taken place in May, starting in May 16, and not finally signed off until June 17, may well be that there were changes to the course content, so it wasn't finally signed off. So, do you remember earlier in evidence I said that we would do pilots? Sometimes, if there was a minor tweak to the pilot, we would still run the course. So you could have further iterations of courses almost as a subsequent pilot course.
Thank you. Now, can we turn to another minute of the Incident Command Project Board, and this time it's meeting on the 22nd of August 2017, so broad terms 2 months after the fire. That can be found at LFB 00118195. And if we can go to page 2 under item 4, we see a number of updates there in relation to the new Incident Command training courses. And under the second subheading, which is Level 2 Development, Maintenance and Group Manager, the update reads thus: DM, so that's Doug Massey from Babcock, advised that the second GM pilot is due to go ahead 11th and 12th September, whereas the updates below for the Level 3 and Level 4 courses refer to meetings taking place to, quotes, scope the requirements for the Level 3 and 4 course. Now, looking at the dates there, Mr. Grove, would you accept that despite the LFB's intention of delivering the new courses by April 2013, by August 2017, that had only been partially completed? Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Would you accept that more than 4 years after the intended deadlines, the new courses had not been scoped out for levels 3 and 4 and only prospective pilots for level 2?
Yes.
Can you explain for the panel why there'd been a delay of 4 years or so?
I can't explain the delay, but I can explain that the priority was level 1 and level 2, because that's where the vast majority of the workforce needed to have acquisition training. For level 3 and 4, there is existing courses that are available either through the Fire Service College or through a course known as MAGIC, which is for senior officers in incident command. So there were existing courses for level 3 and 4. So the focus and the priority was put on level 1 and 2.
Now, if the focus and priority was put on levels 1 and 2, we have a position here in August 2017, pilots only had been carried out. What interim guidance, advice, training was provided in relation to levels 1 and 2, the people most likely to have to stand up to be incident commanders? What was given to them so that the recommendations of LACNL were met whilst the final programmes were being finalised?
I can't recall that.
Was there any?
I can't recall that either, sorry.
Do you remember any complaints that there wasn't any interim material so that crews were aware of the issues that had been highlighted at LACNL?
No, I don't recall that at all.
Can we turn to the witness statement you provided to the Metropolitan Police, which can be found at Met 0071103 and page 8? And from the second line down, from the top, you say this: there are a number of training areas within the LFB that are considered a priority. Incident command training is considered to be the crown jewels of training and has always been a priority training topic. Would you accept that, certainly in relation to level 2, incident command training had not been accorded the priority and the expedition it deserved?
I would say that it was still considered to be a priority. There was the issue around subject matter expertise, signing off the content, but it was and still remains a priority training project.
Would you accept that, having waited 4 years, and in relation to level 2, it's difficult to see the words priority having any meaning?
Yes, I can accept that.
Would you accept the same criticism in respect of levels 3 and 4 as well?
I would say less so for level 3 and 4 for the reasons I've just explained, because there were existing courses available and there are courses that were recognised nationally. But I can see why that would stand for level 2, yes.
If there were no training, interim training, to deal with the matters identified by the coroner at LACNL provided to level 1 and 2 incident commanders, would you consider that to be an acceptable position 4 years after the coroner had actually provided recommendations?
No, definitely not.
Was that ever a source of concern within the LFB?
Yes, I think, as I've explained, there were a number of meetings and with Babcock, and it, as I say, ultimately went up to the Chief Exec and the Commissioner.
But not enough to get it done within 4 years?
I think that's a fair comment.
Now, the we will explore with other witnesses the work of the LFB in seeking to incorporate national operational guidance on incident command. To what extent did the need to await and incorporate more material contribute to the delayed execution of the incident command courses?
I think the national, so NOG content was a consideration. There was discussions around how the courses were not fully NOG aligned, and that there was a need to incorporate the NOG elements in the course content.
But that wasn't a significant factor in contributing to the delay.
No.
Can I now turn to a separate but linked question? That's the question of high-rise materials being updated following LACNOR. And I'd like to deal first of all with Babcock-provided high-rise training materials. Now, we've got a handful of those documents on high-rise firefighting. First of all, could we go to NFB 00120817, which really starts at page 3. And here we have the title page, and it's the LFB's Standard Training Support Package, which I think is called an STSP, is that right?
That's right.
And it concerns high-rise buildings and their features, is that right?
Yes.
And it's dated September 2011.
Yes.
What is a Standard Training Support Package?
So in essence, it's something that was contained on the desktop, which was a training pack that stations could utilise, a bit of a forerunner to operational news and station packages.
Thank you. And in your second witness statement, apologies for leaping about these documents a bit here, but in your second witness statement at LFB 00102138/66, you refer to another iteration of this training support package, which was dated, I think, 26th of September 2014. Mm-hmm. Now, before we turn to that, we say in paragraph 135, which is at the bottom of this page, you say that as the STSP was computer-based, it sat under the training support icon, which could be accessed by staff to complete the training rather than the training being delivered. Mm-hmm. Now, would that arrangement apply equally to the 2011 predecessor as well?
Yes.
Was there any requirement for personnel to complete the 2011 and the 2014 packages, or was it simply a resource that was there if it was needed?
Both. So it was a resource that was held on the system. So if it was identified as an individual training need, individuals would be referred to it. But also as part of operational news, it may well have signposted them to those packages for them to refresh themselves.
Thank you. Now, if we go to the 2014 package, which is LFB 00024166, there you go. You can take it from me that the content is substantially similar, if not identical, to its 2011 predecessor. Does that ring true as an observation without me going through it all for you?
If you say that's the case, I accept it. I wouldn't know.
Well, if we can go to the one difference that arises, and it's at page 42 in this document, and it's a new topic which is entitled Operational Response. And if we turn over to page 43, we see that its aim is to allow firefighters to understand the correct brigade procedures to be followed at high-rise incidents. Now, taking it from me that apart from that slide, the 2011 and 2014 packages were identical. Put bluntly, was it common for these type of training materials to be recycled over the course of the years?
Yes.
Now, the inquiry has a draft Tcap form for high-rise firefighting, and we can find that at LFB 00051646. And if we can go to page 3, we can see that it was drafted by Patrick Utting on the 19th of February 2015. And if we turn over to page 4, and we see towards the bottom of that page, section 1.6, under the heading Background Context, it says the following. Review of Policy 633, High-Rise Firefighting, following new Generic Risk Assessment 3.2, Firefighting in High-Rise Buildings, and Rule 43, LACNAL Inquiry. Is that right? Have I read it out correctly?
Yes, sorry.
Then if we go over the page to page 5, there is the impact analysis in section 3 in the bottom half of that page. Mm-hmm. And am I right in saying that identifies a number of existing training packages which are said to be affected by this Tcap, including firefighter development, which is FFD, mm-hmm. and incident command courses?
Yes.
Now, the inquiry has not been provided with any new high-rise training package or with evidence to suggest that existing courses were amended in the light of this particular Tcap. Can you help us as to whether those materials were in fact produced?
Is this Tcap 212, high-rise?
Yes. Would you like to go back to the front page?
Yeah, please.
Can we just go back to page 3? Is that, or the page 2? Let's see if there's anything there. Page 1.
I think this is Tcap 212.
I think you're right.
It's high-rise in insulated buildings. I think it was ultimately renamed.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that's.
Yeah.
I'm told not.
No, it's a different one then, is it?
But can you remember looking? If we can go back to page 5.
Yeah. So yeah.
Just looking at the training packages which were said to be affected. Mm-hmm. So this is a Tcap that's concerned with the review of policy 633 and firefighting in high-rise buildings. Mm-hmm. We've got the training packages that are said to be affected, firefighter development and incident command amongst others. Mm-hmm. We don't have any documents which show that materials were produced as a result of the amendments. Do you know, can you help us to whether any materials were produced?
I can't because I recall that as Tcap 212, so it's...
It may be we can come on to that at a later date. We'll review the position overnight and see whether there's anything we can come back to tomorrow morning. Now, do you have any recollection of revisions being made to any training packages as a result of a Tcap triggered by a review of 633?
This was at the time of the fire, isn't it? It's not subsequent.
Not subsequent.
No. So I can say categorically subsequent, but I couldn't say that prior.
Let's see if there's anything here which I can seems familiar, and if I can ask you to go to BAB, quadruple 0 0072. This is entitled OP 007, High-Rise Procedure. Are you familiar with that package?
I'm familiar with the firefighter modules, yes.
Are you able to help us? Would firefighters have been tested on the contents of this package?
If it had been identified as part of in Ops News as station-based personnel needed to refresh themselves with the content. This is predominantly for new entrants within the service.
And if it were for new entrants, would they be assessed on their answers to the questions under this package?
Some of the modules did have an assessment component. I don't know whether this was one of those.
Now, can we go to a separate and linked topic which may flow from the discussion we've been having about insulated buildings and various consideration of those matters, and really it's the rejection of case studies on rapid fire spread. by the training department in relation to high-rise buildings. And if we could start on that topic by going to an email chain, which is LFB 000024113, and the second email down from the top of that page. And that email was sent on the 14th of October 2013 at 13:23, when you emailed Steve Green, who worked, as we've discussed, in the training department's learning development strategy team, and you say this: further to our recent discussion, this suggestion is right up your street to comment on. Can you please let me have your thoughts? Now, the suggestion itself is halfway down page 2. Under the helpful heading of suggestion. And it reads this: my suggestion is to extensively expand the number of operational case studies available in training support. Experience is undoubtedly the greatest teacher. And with this in mind, I propose that case studies of a complete range of different incidents, from international, national, and London Fire Brigade operational events, are listed in training support for use as training lectures. Case studies to be categorised according to both incident type and main learning points, and further linked to brigade policy. The East Hill case study has a gravity that demands attention and encourages debate. Please easily remember the points raised. People easily remember the points raised. There are many other important case studies available, including major incidents such as the Windsor Tower fire in Madrid, Shirley Towers in Southampton, and Telstar House high-rise fire. These three encompass high-rise firefighting techniques, weight of attack, aerials, the Coanda effect, and heat stress, only some of the learning points. Now, stopping there and moving to the response drafted by Stephen Green at the bottom half of this page, so if we can de-expand here and look at the response, and really the third paragraph of that response, Mr. Green said this: our incident management training already make use of case studies from other brigades whose operational procedures closely align to our own. Case studies from overseas where the operational procedures employed will undoubtedly be significantly different, would be of questionable benefit. Now, it appears from this limited exchange that your department made substantive decisions about the content of high-rise training at least. Is that a fair summary of the position?
At this point in time, I was not responsible for commissioning. If you see, it's got my header, which was business relationships. So I forwarded it to, this would have been Kevin Hughes, lead at the time. But yes, I think it was ultimately for that department to consider.
And they seem to have decided, they've gone beyond consideration, they seem to be in the decision phase, don't they, here?
Yeah. Yep.
And so it's evidence of the training department making decisions on the substance of high-rise firefighting policy.
Yep.
Or training, I should say.
Yep.
Now, we know that the Windsor Tower fire in Madrid was a high-rise cladding fire that started on the 21st floor and ultimately spread to all floors from ground to the 29th floor. Now, do you agree that in receiving this email, your department, and I use that word advisedly, was on notice of an international cladding fire?
My department wasn't. I wasn't.
No, that's why I use the word advisedly.
Yeah, yes, definitely. I think it makes it clear that those case studies would be of benefit.
And the possibility of learning lessons from those fires.
Yeah.
Now, we don't have any evidence to suggest that anyone in the training department, Mr. Green or anyone else, passed on this information to operational policy, incident management, or the fire safety departments. Mm-hmm. Would that be normal, i.e. the information would be kept within your department and not circulated elsewhere?
No, that wouldn't be normal, and it should have been shared with those departments you've just listed. And part of the ODCB meeting would have been to look at national operational learning and joint organisational learning. So potentially, and I can't say categorically, these incidents should have been brought to the attention of that meeting to highlight the fact that there was learning elsewhere, and consideration should have been given to whether it's included in existing training or changes to existing training.
Put slightly differently, is it fair to assume, or is it fair that you assumed that Learning and Development Strategy was forwarding this information, but you can't say whether they did so in each and every occasion.
That's exactly the case, yes.
Can I now turn to the local nature of high-rise training as a separate topic, and including Back to Basics, a programme rolled out in 2016, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Now, aside from the computer-based packages we looked at earlier on, the inquiry has not been provided with any other centralised training which focuses exclusively, and I use those words advisedly, they don't focus exclusively on high-rise procedure. Was there an expectation that high-rise procedures would be practiced, trained out by staff at the station level and not higher?
Yes, there were. Remember we spoke earlier about borough training plans?
Yes.
Part of that would be an exercise in high rise. Yeah.
And local stations would know they had to train out on high-rise fires.
It would have been part of that risk inventory that the borough commander needed to complete.
Now, in phase one, we heard evidence on the annual Back to Basics programme, which had a high-rise theme for 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is it right that all areas and stations would cover and address the same annual theme?
For Back to Basics, yes.
Who decided that theme?
That was by the Director of Operations, which was Mr. Brown at the time.
How was that theme decided? I'm thinking particularly here, how was the theme of high-rise fires decided by Mr. Brown?
I don't know. Those Back to Basics packages were not run past the training department. It was a separate piece of training altogether. So I don't know how it was.
Did you have, what was, put differently, what was the training department's involvement in the Back to Basics programme?
None at all.
Were you ever sought, was your advice or expertise ever sought by the department with responsibility?
No, I did raise it in a meeting. Why was this being done without going through the training department? But our advice wasn't sought.
Did you raise the concern that there was a need to ensure that whatever was being trained out via Back to Basics was consistent with centrally provided training?
Yes.
And you expressly articulated that concern?
That was in a top management group meeting.
And to whom was that comment specifically addressed, Mr. Gross?
So there would have been about 30 people in the meeting. I seem to recall that I was advised that there was a Back to Basics being developed by a particular DAC. I believe it was a DAC for South East area. And I raised the concern at that point, why was this being done without going through due governance and the fact that it might be contradictory.
And what response did you receive to those points?
That they would raise the matter with Mr. Brown.
Did you hear any further from Mr. Brown or anyone else?
No.
To what extent were you aware of meaningful differences between the content of centrally provided training on high-rise fire procedure and what was being trained out under the Back to Basics programme?
I wasn't aware of any differences. I just thought that they needed to be combined.
Thank you. Can I now turn to a separate and new topic, which is training on facade fires themselves? Now, in your capacity of head of training, am I right in understanding that you're a standing member of the ODCB?
I was, yes.
And just before we launch ourselves at the ODCB, can you remind everyone what those letters stand for?
The Operations Directorate Coordination Board.
And is it right that before your appointment as the head of training, you frequently, if not invariably, attended in place of Mr. Dalglish, your immediate superior?
Yeah, deputised for him, yes.
Now, if we can go to ODCB minutes of a meeting on the 16th of March 2015, which can be found at LFB 000 40619. And we can see here that you attended, you're fourth from the bottom on the list of attendees, and on this occasion you attended with Mr. Dalglish. Mm-hmm. And if we could turn to item 3, mm-hmm. which is under the heading IMPD 6 monthly report, July to December. it's Incident Management Project Development, presumably IMPD. I'm afraid there are a number of acronyms here, so will you forgive me? So the HOOP, which is the Head of Operational Procedures, which is Peter Cowup, to discuss the issues raised relating to highly insulated buildings and rapid fire growth on page 2 with HOHS, who was the Head of Health and Safety, who was Dr. Adrian Bevan, is that right?
That's right.
Do you recall what, quotes, the issues raised relating to highly insulated buildings and rapid fire growth were?
No, I can't recall that.
Now, the inquiry has a copy of the 6-monthly IMPD report, and if we can go to that at LFB 000084395. I think this was prepared by DAC Ellis, who we came across earlier. If that could be expanded so you can just familiarise yourself with it. Would you have received a copy of this report in advance of the meeting in July 2015? Now, could we go to page 4? And halfway down page 4, we see a heading, Proposed Articles for Operational News. Edition 30 December 2015. Then at the very bottom of this page, we see the subheading 2, Highly Insulated Buildings and Rapid Fire Growth. Then if we turn over the page to page 5, the substance of this item reads as follows, and apologies for reading this out. Recent reports from across the UK fire sector have highlighted the specific dangers associated with fighting fires in highly insulated buildings. As the level of insulation afforded in modern buildings increases, 2 factors pertaining to fire are affected. The ability of such buildings to contain heat increases. This means that less energy is required to heat a room to the point where flashover might occur, and the temperatures that can be achieved during a fire are increased. The external indicators that a fire is occurring are reduced. Highly insulated buildings need to be well sealed. Gaps or cracks in the building envelope allow heat to leak out, reducing thermal efficiency and reducing their environmental performance. As a result of steps taken to reduce heat loss and SELA, S-E-L-A, I don't quite know what that is, gaps, less smoke from a fire will be able to exit the building to be seen by passers-by or members of the fire service attending an incident. Rapid fire growth is becoming an increasingly common feature in highly insulated buildings. Studies have shown that firefighters have often been unprepared for such rapid fire growth, and as a result have not used effective firefighting tactics. Compartment fire behaviour training in simulator units has contributed towards this lack of preparedness, in that the fire in these units rarely extends past the compartment of origin, and therefore firefighters are not necessarily taught how to identify signs and symptoms of impending sudden fire growth. Now, before we go on to read the recommendation, just ask you a few preliminary questions. Had you been made aware of the issue of rapid fire growth at any point before this meeting and receiving this report?
I would imagine not, but
It doesn't strike you in your memory, though?
no.
Can you recall the thrust of ODCB's consideration of rapid fire growth as an increasing phenomenon?
I think the fact that Mr. Ellis brought that forward to the board and he was the subject matter expert, then the board would have taken his advice seriously.
Given the comments there about a lack of preparedness, what did you or your department do in terms of liaising with Babcock to make good the deficiencies that have been identified by this report?
I can't recall, but seeing that in the cold light of day, anything there that is criticising the simulated training environment, then I would have expected us to have raised that with Babcock to say that we need to look for training in a realistic environment.
Did you ask Babcock to investigate such training?
I don't recall that, no.
If you didn't, who would have done from your department?
Not someone from my department, commissioning department, probably ops policy could have done through Mr. Cowup.
Would you have liaised with Mr. Cowup, or did you liaise with Mr. Cowup to ensure that ops policy were doing something about it to commission training? Would you have left it to his own discretion?
I didn't liaise with him, so on that basis, I suppose it would be that I would have expected Mr. Cowup to include that as part of the training requirement.
Would it, or in your meetings with Babcock, would you have asked them, have you been approached by ops policy to make good the lack of preparedness that had been identified by Assistant Commissioner Ellis?
No, that's not how the sort of process worked at the time. It was very much that the commissioning departments, who were the subject matter experts, would come to us as a department so that they wanted there was a gap, and that they wanted that then to be that gap to be filled via the Tcap process.
And the bottom line is you didn't receive such an approach or request from ops policy?
No.
Thank you. Now, if we can go back to the report, which is still on the screen, and under the heading recommendation put forward by DAC Ellis, he said this: ODCB is requested to consider an Ops News article on highly insulated buildings and the dangers of rapid fire spread. ODCB is further requested to consider a proposal for a training solution to address the issues highlighted. The training intervention should give firefighters an awareness of the increase in the number of highly insulated buildings under construction in London, and provide examples of the construction techniques and materials used. The training solution should also highlight the dangers associated with firefighting in such buildings, and outline how to identify signs and symptoms of rapid fire growth and the firefighting tactics that should be deployed to contain and extinguish such fires. Would the development of an operational news article and a training package, so the two run together, typically be an indicator of the topic's importance?
Yes.
Do you recall whether the importance of this topic was discussed at the ODCB meeting, or indeed subsequently?
I know that this package was discussed on a number of occasions, yes.
Now, if we go back to the minutes, LFB 000400647 on the 15th of June 2015, Thank you. So this is 3 months after the minutes of the meeting we've just been considering. You again attended, and we can see you there fourth on the list of attendees as Head of Learning and Development and HR Strategy. And if we go to item 4, which is Headed Agreement of Operational News Themes, we see the following update. So is it the HOOP? How would you pronounce it internally?
We would say the Head of OP.
The Head of OP, which is Operational Procedures, Peter Cowup, reported that after discussion with OA, so that's Operational Assurance,
Yes.
headed by Danny Cotton,
Yes.
an article was to be prepared and issued regarding ventilation issues and materials of construction. This was considered relevant rather than specifically subjecting the issues relating to highly insulated buildings and rapid fire growth, agreed to continue with existing themes. Now, at first blush, looking at how it's recorded here, Peter Cowup seems to be suggesting that the article should focus on building materials rather than consequential fire spread, or on firefighters not being prepared for fire spread beyond the compartment of origin. Now, first of all, do you accept that's a fair reading of what Mr. Cowup appears to be suggesting?
That's a fair reading of how it's been recorded, yes.
Do you remember now why Mr. Cowup was suggesting a markedly different approach to that commended by DAC Ellis?
No, I'm sorry, I don't recall that.
Now, we know that an article was published in Operational News, issue 30 in January 2016, and we have a copy of that issue, and it's found at LFB 000061482. And if we go to page 5, we see the article, and if we can go on to page 8, and if that could be expanded, we see a list of training associated with the substance of each article. And the third row relates to the one that we're concerned with here, which is fires in highly insulated buildings. And there, watches are referred to LFB policies and to the highly insulated buildings computer-based training package, CBT. Now, mindful of what's set out there, can we go to the contents of your second witness statement, which is at LFB 00102138/24. If we go to paragraph 38 at the bottom and 6th line down, there you exhibit the Tcap form relating to the CBT package that we're considering here, and say this Tcap was raised in October 2015 and related to a CBT package linked to Operational News 30. I understand that the inquiry has already been provided with Operational News 30, dated January 2016, which sets out the mandatory training arising out of this training requirement. This package was developed, but due to IT issues, has since been withdrawn, as set out within the Tcap. It is intended that this package will be relaunched in Ops News 40. Can you help us, given the existence of those IT issues, why the operational news article referred to a CBT package that was not in existence?
No.
Who would have been responsible for drafting the text inserted in that article?
That would have been Mr. Ellis's department.
And would you, or when I say you, I mean someone in your department, have been asked to check the accuracy of what is set out?
No.
No. And that never happened, is that
That
right?
never happened.
So I think that may be an appropriate point.
Yes, good. Right, well, at this point, Mr. Groves will have a short break. We'll come back at 25 to 4, please. And again, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence when you're out of the room.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. 25 to 4, please.
Thanks, sir.
Would you ask Mr. Groves to come back in, please? Thank you. All right, Mr. Groves.
All right, thank you.
All right, you happy to carry on?
Yes,
Good.
yes.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Kinnear.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Groves, thank you. Can we turn to the Tcap that flowed from the CBT package that we've been discussing, or triggered it? And it's your exhibit PG32, which can be found at LFB 00102213. Now, this is Tcap number 0212. Is this what you were
That's what I was recalling earlier.
recalling
yes.
earlier? Thank
Yeah.
you. This is its title is Ops News 30: Highly Insulated Buildings. Can we turn to page 3, please? And we can see there in the version control table, first version created by Nick Markwell, who we were discussing earlier on, 14th of October 2015. Version 2, 10th of October 2019, final draft for close down. Now, are those dates, to the best of your knowledge, correct?
Yes.
Now, can we turn to page 4 and box 1.4? That box is entitled Tcap Stakeholder Group Members. No one is identified there from the training department. Do you know why?
No, and there would have been someone from the training department there. You wouldn't have a stakeholder group without someone from that department. I'd imagine that would have been Mr. Markwell.
The author.
So I don't know whether now is NM. That's,
Well, there's only one letter there.
Yeah, I know.
Don't
Yeah.
speculate, Mr.
yeah, no,
Mr.
don't know.
Rose.
Yeah.
But if we can look at box 1.5, there's no subject matter expert either. Are you able to help us as to why there's no SME identified?
Because Mr. Goodall and Mr. Spooner would have been the subject matter experts.
So not applicable is not strictly accurate there.
Correct.
Now, at the bottom of this page, the background context given the Tcap is set out thus. The key thrust of the Ops News 30 article and package is that firefighters should be aware of the implication on their firefighting tactics of the increasing use of highly insulated sealed compartments, fire development in these compartments, and the hazards associated with modern methods of construction. The article and package should highlight a number of key concerns and developments relating to modern methods of, go over the page, construction, and signpost the new improved modern methods of construction CBT package. The emphasis in the CBT package should be on the implications, spelling is correct, modern methods of construction for firefighting tactics. This should be in greater depth than currently exist in training package. It is not sufficient to talk about rapid fire spread and/or unusual fire spread through voids, cavities, etc. A short question, who drafted that text?
I'd imagine that would have been Mr. Markwell in consultation with the commissioning department.
The final sentence expressly contends that current training packages were not sufficient. Is that a view with which you'd agree?
I couldn't say.
You'd never directed yourself to form a view on the subject?
No.
If Mr. Markwell were the author, would his view on the subject be something you'd accept?
No, it would be the commissioning department.
Okay. Now, in terms of what your department was being told that training needed to achieve, we can find this on page 7 within box 4.1. And that box sets out in depth the requirements of the CBT package itself. Now, I don't ask you to read that, but can you help us? Was that text likely to have come from the commissioning department as well?
Yes.
Now, looking at this page, we can see from the bottom that firefighters up to the rank of group managers were due to be trained on this topic, and the package was to be delivered in December 2015 to coincide with the release of operational news edition 30 in January 2016. Can you help us in the first instance, and it may well be the answers pregnant from some of the previous answers, why is training limited to level 1 and level 2? Is it because they're the most likely to have attended an incident?
Yes.
Is there a reason why a self-study package could not have been provided to all senior staff, i.e. above the rank of group manager up to AC?
No, not at all.
Would that have been, do you know whether that possibility was considered?
I couldn't say. I don't know.
Is it unlikely because of the likelihood of level 1 and 2 incident commanders attending?
Yeah, it's unlikely.
Now, the Tcap's progression was discussed by ODCB on the 31st of March 2016. And so we're now a year after the issue was first raised. And we can see this from the minutes at LFB 000400711. We can see that you attended. Now, in relation to highly insulated buildings training package, we can see a number of updates. And if we could turn first of all to item 2 and the IMPD 3-monthly report, and the high insulation buildings is the first in the list of updates, and it says a note to be circulated reference the currently situation around the training package. Now, the inquiry has been unable to locate a copy of that note, but if we turn over the page to page 2 and look at item 4, we see dynamic and intelligent operational training and procedures update. And if we look at Roman 3, that reads thus: fire in highly insulated buildings is a computer Cbt package which has been developed but not gone live yet due to IT issues. It was confirmed that the IT solution lays with LFB, and it was hoped that these issues will be resolved with the IT rollout that is expected to begin in May. And we see in the left-hand column that those responsible for actioning this were the Director of Safety Insurance, who is Danny Cotton, the Head of Training, you, Director of Operations, Dave Brown, and the Head of Fire Stations, which was Dominic Ellis. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, all that was an extremely long run-up to a short question. What was your role in the development of the training package? And by you, I mean the training department.
Yet again, it would have been programme management of that package. Content would have been provided by a commissioning department.
Could we go back to the relevant Tcap form, which can be found at LFB 00102213/16? Now, if that could be expanded. And apologies again, this is a retrospective update that was added in October 2019, so 2 and a bit years after the Grenfell fire. I'm sorry it's a long passage, but it's probably useful if I go through it for those following the proceedings. It says the training relating to this Tcap was commissioned as part of Ops News 30, which was released in January 2016. However, due to the issues detailed below, it could not be released. The Brigade changed from using Internet Explorer 8 to Internet Explorer 11 in January 2015. This caused significant disruption to the functionality of the Big Learning online training portal. When the Big Learning is used with Internet Explorer 11, it does not record the progress that the user has made or the completion of the package that has been undertaken. There are also issues with the packages loading correctly. This was compounded by the fact that the ICT department could only support a 2 MB internet link at many stations, which meant that packages with digital images were not able to run correctly. The training relating to this Tcap was ready to be piloted by January of 2016, but due to the issues detailed above, the package would not function correctly and was therefore could not be released. The following message was sent from AC Dominic Ellis in April 2016. Operational News 30, fires in highly insulated buildings, and then it goes on to explain the position again. Now, can we deal first with this question of the issue of packages not recording progress or completion? And if we can look at the wording of the update in the Tcap, which said that the Brigade had moved from Internet Explorer 8 to 11, that caused disruption. Is it right that a user can log in to the Big Learning portal and take or retake computer-based training packages at any time?
Yes.
If the problem with the Big Learning portal, if the problem was with that, would that have affected all other training packages at the time?
If it contained video, I believe the issue is around video.
Video rather than any other form of image?
Yeah. I believe there was about 6 packages that were affected.
Did the LFB consider using workaround solutions? So, for example, a different browser to allow videos to be played?
No, but I know that there was a fix. There was a temporary fix that was considered, but unfortunately that didn't resolve the situation either.
Was it possible to return to Internet Explorer 8 for these purposes?
No, I believe there was an issue with the license, so it was going to be discontinued. So no, that couldn't happen.
Would it have been possible for individual watches to record manually or on paper the fact that they'd completed the exercise?
Yes, I think that could have been, yeah.
And that could have been submitted either to your department or to whoever?
Yeah.
Do you remember whether that option was discussed at the time?
I don't recall that being discussed.
Now, turning to the second issue of packages loading and displaying images correctly, by digital images, I think, although the Tcap refers to that phrase, the problem was videos, was it?
It was, yeah.
Now, can we go to an email sent by Peter Cowap to his operational policy team? It's LFB 000 98135. Now, this was sent, as you can see from the top, I hope, 16th of June 2014. You were not copied in. And we can see that he says, all, please see below a quick update on key issues arising for OP from today's ODCB. And if we look at the third item in his list, he says there are continuing technical issues with including video in training packages, which will be fully resolved in medium term by upgrading bandwidth to stations and replacing, is it WISE terminals?
Yes.
At HQ. In the meantime, if Babcock adhere to IT's video formatting guidance, etc., video should work, but not with 100% reliability. For senior officers, a simple solution is to watch anything with video at home via remote access, where bandwidth, etc., won't be a problem. Both of the technical upgrades that are required are currently scheduled for early 2015, but this work may be brought forward as both are relatively straightforward and not massively costly. Can you help us? What happened to the, quote, straightforward, close quotes, upgrade scheduled for early 2015?
So this was the fix that was being prepared. Once it was introduced, it worked in the headquarters environment. It didn't work at fire stations. That goes back to bandwidth. So officers could complete that at headquarters where the bandwidth was greater than it was at stations.
Gary Reason was your director until January 2015. Did you discuss these problems with him and what workarounds were achievable?
Certainly would have discussed this with my line manager at the time. This was topic of repeated discussion at the Performance and Commissioning Board meeting.
Now, if we can go to ODCB meeting minutes from March 2016, this issue comes up again, just following on from the point you've just made. And if we go to LFB 000 40711, and if we can see under item 4 on page 2, thank you. Dynamic and Intelligent Operational Training and Procedures Update, and we look at Roman numeral 3. It's reported that fire in highly insulated buildings is a computer Cbt package which has been developed but not gone live yet due to IT issues. It was confirmed that the IT solution lays with LFB, and it was hoped that these issues will be resolved with the IT rollout that is expected to begin in May, so that's May 2016. Can you help us? What IT rollout was expected in May 2016?
Yeah, so that's the interim fix in terms of the internet portal.
And what happened to that rollout?
It happened, but it didn't fix the problem.
Would you have been able to get around this perpetual problem by instructing Babcock not to include videos in the training package?
Yes, could have done that. I have a recollection, but I can't. I try to find documents to substantiate this, but I can recall having discussions whether we could produce a separate package without the videos. But my recollection was that was dismissed by the commissioning department on the basis that the video components help to take the individuals through the learning, and there was a danger if you just issued the documents without that sort of accompanying explanation. There was a risk that if they weren't following information correctly, that could be just as much of a risk of not doing something.
Could the videos have been recorded on a CD, for example, and sent to stations?
We certainly did that for another piece of training, yes.
But not for this one?
No.
Did anyone suggest the use of CDs?
No.
No. But it was another option that could have worked and avoided the problem?
We certainly did that for another piece of training, yes.
And it's not expensive either, presumably?
No.
If CDs had been used, or the instruction not to use videos, whilst perhaps not ideal or optimal, would you agree that opting one of those approaches would have meant that crews would have received risk-critical training far sooner in relation to rapid fire spread in the modern built environment?
Yes, I accept that.
And there's no reasonably practical reason for example, CDs to be sent?
No.
Could we look at the content of the buildings package itself? And if we could go to BAB, quadruple 00016. And here we go. You can see at the front, core skills, highly insulated buildings. If we go to page 3, if the slide could be amplified. As far as we can go. You can see the package's aims and objectives. The aim was to increase awareness of highly insulated compartments and associated operational considerations. Objectives, the first one, describe how highly insulated compartments impact on firefighting techniques and strategies. And then penultimate one, outline what best practice should look like at an incident with a highly insulated compartment. And then if we go on to page 7, we see the start of a number of slides on modern methods of construction, and the first one here is thermal insulation boards. And if we go on to page 9, we see here that a warning is given to delegates roughly halfway down the page, retrospective fitting. A building should not be judged by its facade. Older buildings are commonly retrofitted with new construction materials and technology. When carrying out a 7.2D, a detailed site-specific plan must be developed. Now, the inquiry has a copy of the training guide prepared to accompany this WAT-based package, and if we could look at that, which is at BAB quadruple 00038. There we go. Was the intention of these guides to explain how packages should be presented to staff?
Yeah. Yes.
Who would typically present these guides?
So,
these packages, sorry.
yep, so this would have been the watch manager.
Now, so someone like Michael Dowden.
Yes.
And if we can go to page 20 within this document, we see the following text. If it can come up. Read the following text to the watch, so it's directional. The effectiveness of compartmentation relies on good workmanship at installation in it being in a good state of repair. Failure to seal gaps and voids reduces the fire-stopping element of construction and can contribute to the unseen spread of smoke, fire from one compartment to another. Looking at that, how common was it for technical information like that to be provided to watch managers to read out to their crews?
That was common.
Can we go back now to the Tcap form itself, which is LFB 00102213/5? And the final 3 lines of the box, if it can be expanded, thank you. The emphasis in the CBT package should be on the implications of modern methods of construction for firefighting tactics. And it says this should be in greater depth than currently exists in training. It is not sufficient to talk about rapid fire spread and or unusual fire spread through voids, cavities, etc. Are you able to assist, or would you agree, that the training department knew that this training was not replicated in other training packages?
I would take from that was the case, yes.
And that absence made the timely and swift dissemination of this training all the more important.
Yes.
And that was a factor that ought to have attracted greater weight when considering workarounds when faced with the IT problems.
Yep.
Did anyone raise that concern when these matters were being debated?
Yeah, I mean, the issue with the IT delay and solution was that each time we thought we were there, and so it would be, there's no point going back to the drawing board because the solution will be resolved within the next couple of months, but obviously that wasn't the case.
Now can I turn to a distinct but closely related topic, and that's the updates that were necessitated by the operational news article on fires in highly insulated buildings. And if we can go to LFB 00088900/4. And we can see there that changes are identified for firefighter development, breathing apparatus and real fire, and incident command at sea. Mm-hmm. Now, in respect of the incident command changes, the report stated in the 3rd paragraph on this page, incident scenarios are being created for the rollout of the new IC training across levels 1 to 3. The index for a range of these scenarios will include hazards and signs associated with highly insulated buildings. The content of the article will be raised by trainers during the delivery of current incident command training. Now, we've seen no evidence to indicate that the lessons underlying the highly insulated buildings package were included in the new incident command training packages, or alternatively, that injects were developed specifically dealing with these issues. So the first question is, can you assist the inquiry on what work, if any, was done to incorporate those matters into the new incident command courses?
Oh, I can't assist you with that, I'm sorry.
Who would be able to assist us in answering that question?
Someone from the commissioning department for incident command.
So Peter Cowup's department.
Yeah.
I now want to turn on to a separate topic, and that's the links between operational training and fire safety department. Mm-hmm. Now, you would be aware the inquiry's heard evidence that suggests that the risks of rapid fire spread on external walls, facades, were known to the LFB's Fire Safety Department for some time before 2017. That issue in its detail will be explored with other witnesses, but I want to ask what contribution, if any, did the fire safety or the fire engineering departments at the LFB make to operational training on those issues?
Looking at the Tcap, they're not a stakeholder, so I suggest they weren't involved.
From your perspective of training, would someone, in your experience from the Operational Procedures Department, have communicated to someone in the Fire Safety, Fire Engineering Department to discuss the substance of any revisions to training on, for example, how to deal with highly insulated buildings in a fire?
Yeah, I can say that for other pieces of training, then we would have had a representative from the Fire Safety Department as part of the stakeholder group.
On this one, there wasn't.
It's not listed as such, so then no.
Are you able to help us understand as to why no one from fire safety or fire engineering was there?
No, I can't, I'm sorry.
Now, we've only been able to identify one item of operational training relating to fire safety. And the PowerPoint that we've identified, I'll put it up on the screen for you, is LFB 000-36223. Now, it's training, the name is Fire Safety Training for Station Personnel. The PowerPoint is dated the 11th of April 2017, so broad terms 2 months before the Grenfell fire.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen this PowerPoint slide before?
Yes.
Can you remember when? Was it as part of its drafting process or when it was signed off and published?
So this was part of a team briefing. It went out to all staff to deliver over an 18-month period. So I remember the presentation being available, not necessarily having gone through it in detail.
What prompted the need to circulate this slideshow? Was it the article in Operational News?
I don't recall that. I think there was discussions. I think this was commissioned by AC Dan Daly. I'm not 100% sure, but he felt that there hadn't been any specific fire safety training, as it says there, for a significant period of time. So he commissioned that.
Now, we'll come on to that. The LFB's legal team have said to us that, quotes, this is the only operational fire safety package at the time of the Grenfell Tower fire, so far as we are aware. And as you've picked up on, the speaker notes make the point in the first sentence, and I quote, this is the first fire safety training for over 10 years. Had you or any other department within the LFB, and by you I mean the training department, identified previously a need for revised fire safety training? No,
but there was other fire safety training, but it wasn't necessarily face-to-face input. So there were some ops news around 7.2D visits. There's also around home fire safety visits. So this was the first face-to-face input. So there had been other training inputs.
An attempt to deal with the issue comprehensively, presumably?
They were thematic around specific areas.
These Section 7.2D home safety visits, they're aspects of, but not a complete review of fire safety.
Correct.
Now, can we go to the September 2019 Ribbon Star report, which we've been looking at? That's LFB 000-67786. And this aspect of it considered the fire safety department. And if we go to page 37, and if we look at the second paragraph, the author said this: whilst there are clear signs that the fire safety department is taking steps to provide training and development opportunities for staff engaged across each of its teams, there appears to be a lack of engagement between the department and the head of training and personal development. That's you.
That's right.
Can you help us as to why in September 2019 there was a lack of engagement between you and the fire safety department?
Yeah, this isn't, I would say, totally accurate. So we did have a member of staff, one of those project managers within my department, who specifically liaised with fire safety departments. So there was a counterpart in fire safety. So whilst there wasn't necessarily engagement with myself and the head of fire safety, there was their project management and their counterpart. And most of the fire safety training at that point was through outsourced training to a different contractor to Babcock. So our involvement was predominantly around contractual management.
You said in the opening line of your answer to that question it wasn't totally accurate. Now, you've set out there the elements with which you disagree. Where do you agree with the author of the Ribbon report on the lack of engagement between training and the fire safety department?
Yep. So in terms of the commissioning process, there wasn't as close a working relationship between my department and fire safety as there was, for example, with ops policy and assurance.
Had the fact and seriousness of the Grenfell fire in June 2017, had that acted as a trigger or a spur to greater engagement between your department and fire safety?
Yes.
And when did you decide that further engagement was required, and what was done to make good the deficiencies you identified?
Yeah. So myself and the head of fire safety said that we need to have regular meetings to specifically look at training in the area of fire safety. If you recall earlier, there was specific one-to-ones with my department and ops policy and assurance. We introduced that between ourselves and fire safety.
And when did you have that discussion with your counterpart at fire safety?
I can't recall an exact time frame, but it would have been after the fire.
In the immediate aftermath or in months afterward?
I want to say it was within the next 3 months, but I can't say that confidently.
Can I now turn on to a separate issue, which is communications training?
Yes.
And you'll be assured to know this is the last substantive topic in my prepared questions I want to cover with you.
Okay.
And it's really the LFB's training on radio and other communications equipment. And for this purpose, can we start with your second witness statement to the inquiry, which can be found at LFB 00102138/57. Now, basically here, you set out a request from us to the LFB asking for policies, training, or other brigade disseminated materials in place as at the 14th of June 2017. I should say the request is dealt with below paragraph 114. And that request related to, first of all, the use of radios or other communications equipment, particularly in high-rise buildings, and any planning or preparations for the same, and turning over the page, any materials which identify and or consider the possible difficulties with or failures of communications equipment in operational environments and how such problems may be overcome or mitigated. Now we can see at paragraph 115 of your statement, you said this: I am able to respond to this request in respect of training. The following training is provided as part of the firefighter development course. Now, the firefighter development course is the training provided to a trainee firefighter upon entry to the brigade. Is that right?
It is.
Does it follow then that at the time of the Grenfell fire, there was no radio communications training for firefighters beyond their original initial training?
There was nothing specific, but as I mentioned earlier, it was available for individuals to read, but there wasn't a specific training requirement.
Now, you list over the next few pages following paragraph 115 a number of courses, and we can see at the bottom of the page telemetry. Mm-hmm. And if we can just skip over the page to give everyone an idea of the answer. Mm-hmm. You deal with, at page 59, communications equipment and search and rescue comms. We turn over the page to page 60. wearer's guidance. We turn over the page, BA entry control. We turn over the page again to 62, emergency procedures and BA communications equipment. Turn over the page again, instant command and firefighting in basements, and find at page 64. Headline has been cut off, but it's OP 007, high-rise procedure, and OP 015, fixed installations.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is it right to say that these packages deal with communications available to crews and their basic operation?
Correct.
Is it also right to say that none of these materials provide firefighters with comprehensive training on how to optimize communications?
That's correct.
Equally, they do not provide firefighters with training on how to overcome a total communications failure.
That's correct.
Now, we looked at OP 007 earlier today, and if we could look at that particular package again, and it's at BAB quadruple 0 0072. And if we can turn to page 4, and under the second blue heading, communication difficulties, it says this: the design of a high-rise building and the potential distance between the incident commander and the scene of operations can result in communication difficulties. Is it right to say, therefore, that the LFB did not provide any training on why those difficulties occur or how to overcome them in high-rise buildings?
That's fair to say, yes.
And am I also correct in saying that only EDBA wearers, so that's extended duration breathing apparatus wearers, were given practical training on how to deploy radio repeaters and leaky feeders?
That's right. Yes.
Can we now turn to a separate topic, and that is Tcap 0039 on communications following LACNOR. Now, for this purpose, can we go back to your second witness statement, which can be found at LFB 00102138/64. Now, paragraph 128 in the bottom third of that page, you say this: the Brigade issued 2 radio communication training support packages aimed at senior officers and station-based staff as part of Operational News 36, dated February 2019. The training packages cover radio equipment and usage and messages. Now, we can turn to Operational News number 36 at LFB 000-840-88. And if we could turn to page 5. We see there the article headed Communications, and if that right-hand part of the page could be expanded, and we see there the text underneath the photo says this: communications are critical at instance, and due to recent updates, packages have been developed. And then it goes on to explain what those updates are and the aim of the training. Now, are you familiar with Tcap 0039, which was intended to develop radio and communications equipment after LACNOR?
Yes, I'm aware of it.
And its training in relation to those matters, I should say, it's concerned with.
I'd have to refresh my memory.
Okay, well, we'll go. I'm just slightly mindful of the time.
Sorry.
But in the sense that probably have time to complete this. But if we can go to Tcap form 40039, which is LFB quadruple 04729, and go to page 7. We can see in the background context box at the bottom, that could be expanded. And it says there, with the introduction of new radios, it has been identified that there is a training need to ensure all operational personnel have the knowledge and understanding to use authority-issued radio communications equipment in accordance with Brigade policy to ensure effective communications at instance. This training will cover handheld radios with associated equipment and airwave main scheme, both appliance and senior officer radios. Does that jog your memory?
It does.
That's concerned with training.
Yes.
If we can go forward in this Tcap form to page 11 and box 5.1. That could be expanded. We can see that knowledge requirements are listed for both station-based operational staff in the first substantive paragraph, and below them senior officers. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, bearing those matters in mind, can we turn to the Lacknell House Incident Assurance Review Report, which we looked at earlier today, which is at LFB 0004801/30. And if we can see in relation to Coroner's recommendation number 5 in the bottom left-hand corner, if that can be expanded. It says this, under the heading of communications, it is recommended that the Brigade consider whether it would be beneficial to use additional breathing apparatus, radio communications channels and personal radio channels at major incidents to reduce the amount of traffic on each channel. And then the review then explains that while the LFB rejected this recommendation, it committed to undertake some additional instant communications familiarisation training, which is detailed in Action 5A below. Did that accord with your recollection?
It does, yes.
And if we look at, if we can de-expand, sorry to use an elegant phrase, if we look at Action 5A, which was the consequential action, which says engage with the Brigade's training provider to ensure that issues related to instant communications are embedded within current operational training. And we see there it says this, a training commissioning document has been drafted that required the development of a new training solution aimed at ensuring operational staff have the knowledge and understanding to use authority-issued radio communications equipment, including handheld radios and airwave main scheme radios, computer-based training packages, station-based staff, firefighter to watch manager, and senior officers, station manager and above, were signed off in May 2015. However, the training packages have not yet been released. Do you know why those packages had not been released?
For the same reasons as we've been discussing for the high-rise building. It was linked to issues around IT.
And again, the workaround via CDs was not considered,
Wasn't, no.
even though that was a reasonably practicable thing to do.
Yep.
So we are slightly early. It is 4:20. I
Yes.
have got through more of the questions than I'd anticipated, but I don't think I'll be able to finish or feel comfortable about finishing Mr. Groves' evidence this evening. So
Would you rather stop at that point?
I think it would be best. I suspect Mr. Groves has had a long day in the box and would welcome a break. Even that requires him to turn up briefly for the
Yes.
morning session tomorrow. So with your permission, sir.
Well, just help us and Mr. Groves. How long do you think you might need with him tomorrow?
To complete the prepared questions and any further ones that occur to me overnight, half an hour or so. We'd then have the break to see whether there are any
Yes.
further questions.
Well, I think probably, Mr. Groves, you'd like to know that even with these contingencies, we can be pretty confident about finishing you probably well before lunch tomorrow, but certainly by lunch. So that if that helps you plan your day,
Thank you.
there you are.
Thank you very much.
Is that fair enough, Mr. Cadet?
It's fair enough, sir, and we're taking steps to see what can be done to bring witnesses forward. So
Yes, well, that's right.
time
All
for
right,
that.
well, we've obviously made very good progress, so we'll stop a little early this afternoon. I'm afraid, have to ask you to come back tomorrow, as I indicated.
Sure.
So we'll resume, please, at 10 o'clock tomorrow. And look forward to seeing you then. And please don't talk to anyone about your evidence overnight.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you
you
very
very much indeed.
Thank you.
Right. Right, thank you, Mr. Kinnear. 10 o'clock tomorrow,
Thanks, sir.
please. Thank you.